My 13-year-old son told me not to eat the meal my wife served me when I returned after my 2 weeks business trip. He said, "Mom put something inside." I called my lawyer and decided to play along. What happened next will shock you. I will tell you how everything unfolded. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout-out in our next story. Today's special shout-out goes to Jenny Palmer from Ohio. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. I stepped off the plane with my shoulders aching and a migraine building behind my right eye, the price of back-to-back investor meetings and sleepless nights. 2 weeks away for business shouldn't have felt like 2 months, but it did. All I could think about was home. The familiar creak of the hallway floorboards, the scent of lavender on the pillows, and most of all, my son's voice. 13 years old and still at that cusp of boyhood, where his eyes held wonder but his questions were growing sharper. I missed him. As for Cassandra, my wife of 14 years, I wasn't sure what I missed. Our last phone call had been clipped, her tone distracted. She said she was just tired. I believed her, or maybe I chose to. The front door opened before I could even reach for my keys. Adam stood there, barefoot in his pajamas though it was barely 7 p.m., his hair tousled and face pale. He didn't throw his arms around me like he used to. Instead, he glanced over his shoulder nervously, then stepped outside and closed the door behind him. That alone was strange. "Dad," he whispered, voice barely audible. "Don't eat the food Mom made. She put something inside." My heart stuttered. I froze, keys still dangling from my fingers. "What do you mean?" I asked, crouching down to his level. His eyes darted again toward the door. "I heard her on the phone. She said it has to be done tonight. She said you wouldn't feel a thing." He sniffled and rubbed at his nose, like a child trying to erase what he'd heard. I felt a chill race through me despite the warm evening air. Inside, Cassandra met me with a wide smile, dressed in one of her silk robes, wine glass in hand. "There's my hard-working man," she purred, kissing my cheek lightly. The living room was spotless, candles lit, and soft jazz playing in the background. On the table, a full spread, roasted lamb, asparagus with lemon zest, garlic mashed potatoes, my favorites. Too perfect. "You must be starving," she said, motioning me toward the table. "Go ahead, I'll pour you a glass." I sat, stiff, my mind spinning. Adam's warning echoed in my head. I glanced at the wine bottle, unopened. That was good. But the plate. I watched her out of the corner of my eye as she walked into the kitchen. She never looked back, not once. My heart pounded. I pretended to eat, took the fork, brought it to my mouth, but didn't let anything touch my lips. I excused myself after a few bites, feigning exhaustion. "Long flight, baby. I just need to lie down for a bit." Cassandra didn't protest, another red flag. She merely nodded, too eager. "Of course. I'll clean up." I walked upstairs but didn't go to bed. Instead, I locked myself in my office and called James, my lawyer. He answered on the first ring. "I need you at my house," I said. "Bring someone from the police department." Quietly. "Now." I explained just enough to light the fire under him. Then I hung up and set the plan in motion. Back downstairs, I returned to the dining room, waited until Cassandra glanced in my direction from the kitchen, and then dropped like a stone to the floor. I made the fall look real. Limp limbs, head to the side, eyes barely open. I heard her footsteps before I saw her, then the gasp. "Jonathan," she said. "Jonathan." Her voice cracked, not with panic, but disbelief. I heard her set the wine glass down. Then silence. A long, eerie silence that made my skin crawl. That's when I heard it, the click of her phone unlocking, then dialing. She didn't call 911. "It worked," she whispered. "He's out cold. Start loading the car." My blood turned ice. I could barely keep myself still. Her voice shifted from frightened wife to cold conspirator in a single sentence. "No," she said into the phone. "The safe, the documents, everything. We leave tonight." Another pause. "Yes, I'm sure he's not breathing." Then she laughed, soft and breathless. "You should have seen him." I knew that voice on the other end. Even through the muffled speaker, I knew. Daniel, my business partner, my friend of 20 years. We built the company from nothing together. I had named him Godfather to Adam. My insides twisted in a way I couldn't control. I lay there, unmoving, as I heard drawers open and valuables being stuffed into bags. Upstairs, Adam stayed quiet in his room. Thank God. Cassandra moved quickly, methodically. She wasn't panicking. She'd done this in her mind 100 times. I only had to wait 10 more minutes. 10 minutes before James arrived with backup. And then the real performance would begin. I stayed motionless on the hardwood floor, the faint scent of lemon oil from Cassandra's obsessive cleaning habits teasing my nose. Every muscle in my body screamed to react, to spring up, to grab her phone, to drag her into the light and force her to admit it all. But I couldn't. Timing was everything. If I moved too soon, she might get away. If I waited too long, I didn't want to consider what else she might do. The cold edge in her voice had unsettled something deep inside me. This wasn't just betrayal. It was erasure. She wasn't trying to hurt me. She was trying to delete me. Footsteps passed close to my head, then back again. She was in full motion now. I could hear drawers sliding, the metallic clink of jewelry boxes opening, zippers on luggage. She clearly planned this down to the minute. She moved with the ease of someone who had already lived this moment in her mind. Don't forget the passport, she muttered to herself, then cursed under her breath. Where did he keep the damn key? I heard her stomp toward my office door. The knob rattled, locked. She banged twice, then gave up. We'll pry it open later, she said into the phone. Let's just get out before someone sees. I strained to keep my breathing shallow and uneven, just enough to pass for unconscious. My skin was damp with sweat, not from heat, but from holding my body in that terrible limbo. Cassandra stepped over me again, this time more boldly. She didn't even glance down. Her high-heeled sandals clicked toward the front door. That's when I heard it, a car pulling up in the driveway. James didn't knock. The door flew open like he owned the place, and behind him, 2 officers in plain clothes entered fast. Cassandra screamed, half from surprise, half from guilt. She dropped the duffel bag she was holding. Gold chains and a watch tumbled out, clinking on the tile. What the hell is this? She shrieked. Her voice had none of the faux charm she used in public. This was her, unmasked. I sat up slowly, letting the illusion fall away like a stage curtain. The look on her face when she saw me move will haunt me for the rest of my life. It wasn't just fear, it was rage. Betrayal flipped back onto her like a boomerang. She started, but the officers were already in motion. One of them retrieved her phone and began scrolling through her recent call logs. The other read her rights aloud, calm and methodical. Cassandra didn't go quietly. You can't do this. That was private. He's my husband. This is a misunderstanding, she yelled as one of the officers cuffed her. He fainted, that's all. Why are you even here? She looked to me for support, out of habit, I think, but my face gave her nothing. I watched her implode with a detached sort of sadness. This was the woman I had married, the mother of my child, the one who once cried at sad commercials and used to tuck our son into bed every night. Now she was spitting curses at the police, her voice rising until the sound became nearly animal. James handed me the recording we'd made earlier, Cassandra's voice, crystal clear. It worked. Start loading the car. That was all the police needed. But it was far from all I had. Within the hour, the officers had traced the call she made to Daniel. I hadn't needed to say his name. One of them recognized it immediately. Isn't that your partner at Cardionics? The younger officer asked. I nodded slowly, feeling something sharp twist in my chest. He's at the lake house, I said. He has a spare key. Go now. Cassandra was already in the backseat of the unmarked cruiser, screaming that we'd all regret this. She was still yelling when they drove off. The silence that followed was almost worse. I sat on the bottom step of the staircase, staring at nothing. James lowered himself beside me and let out a slow breath. That was heavy, he muttered. You all right? I wanted to say yes, that I was relieved, that justice had prevailed, but I couldn't. All I could see was the look in Adam's eyes. How long had he known? How long had he been afraid to speak? The officers returned to collect evidence, her bag, the food, the drink, her laptop. They bagged the plate I had pretended to eat from. Forensics would confirm what I already knew. Something had been added. Something not meant to kill outright, but enough to send me to the hospital or worse. The goal wasn't murder. It was elimination. Quiet, clean, plausible. By midnight, the house was still again. Except now it felt like a crime scene. I went up to Adam's room and found him curled up under the covers, eyes open, staring at the wall. He looked at me without speaking. I sat beside him and placed a hand gently on his back. "You did the right thing," I whispered. He didn't respond right away. Then he said quietly, "I thought she was going to hurt you." And just like that, I broke. By dawn, the police had Daniel in custody. They found him at the lake house, just as I'd said, dressed in sweats, sipping scotch on the porch like it was just another Tuesday. He didn't even pretend to be surprised. The officer who made the arrest later told me he smiled and asked, "Is this about Cass?" As if her betrayal wasn't worth flinching over. They cuffed him without a struggle. In the trunk of his car, they found 2 briefcases, one filled with cash, the other with documents. My documents, contracts, company files, even a forged letter of resignation with my signature. They planned everything. I watched from the upstairs window as they drove him away in the same unmarked car that had taken Cassandra. Adam stood beside me, holding his stuffed wolf in one hand like he was 6 years old again. I didn't say anything. I just rested my palm on his shoulder. This wasn't a moment to fill with words. This was the moment where everything realigned. Where he knew I would always protect him, and I knew he had already protected me. The police didn't allow me to visit Cassandra immediately. Not that I wanted to, but I did want to see the evidence. My lawyer, James, sat beside me at the precinct that afternoon as the lead investigator showed us the voice recordings. Cassandra's call to Daniel. Daniel's response, "You won't get in the way anymore." I listened to them plot, calmly, like 2 people choosing a wine for dinner. The casual evil of it all made my skin crawl. Daniel even laughed at one point, said something about how ironic it was that John was always the brain, but never saw this coming. James placed a hand on my knee to stop it from bouncing. I hadn't realized how tightly I was wound. We pressed charges, attempted murder for Cassandra, criminal conspiracy, and fraud for both of them. The audio evidence, the packed bags, the drugged food, and Adam's statement sealed the case tighter than I could have hoped. Forensics confirmed that a benzodiazepine, powerful and fast-acting, had been mixed into the gravy, enough to put a grown man into a coma, especially if mixed with alcohol. That's why she hadn't opened the wine yet. She was waiting until I was groggy enough to coax me into one more glass. Sickening. What gutted me more, though, was the timeline. The investigators traced their communications back nearly 7 months. 7 months of text messages, burner phones, lunch meetups labeled board review in her calendar. Cassandra and Daniel hadn't just betrayed me. They created an entire reality behind my back, one where I was the obstacle. A useful ATM until I wasn't. The company's legal team moved quickly once they got wind of Daniel's arrest. I held an emergency board meeting the next day and froze his shares pending the outcome of the case. The CTO, who'd always eyed Daniel suspiciously, volunteered to step in as interim. I approved it with barely a nod. My head was elsewhere. Cassandra had built her betrayal like a spider web, silent, calculated. But Daniel? He was supposed to be my brother-in-arms. We'd slept on floors in Tokyo during our first investor tour. He was at my wedding. He gave the toast. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I paced through the house, revisiting memories I didn't know I needed to question. The anniversary dinner where she wore the red dress and seemed so distracted. The week Adam had gotten food poisoning, and she said it was from the school cafeteria. The strange look on Daniel's face during our last board meeting, when I joked that at least I can still trust you. Had I been blind? Or had I just refused to see? Around 3 a.m., I found myself standing outside Adam's door, listening to the soft rise and fall of his breathing. He didn't deserve any of this. I wanted to go back in time and protect him from every second of it, but the damage had already been done. At breakfast the next morning, he asked if he could still go to his friend Jason's party next weekend. I said yes without hesitation. "We're going to keep life normal," I told him. "No matter what." That afternoon, James called me. "She wants to see you," he said. "Cassandra." At the jail. I didn't answer immediately. "She says it's important." I took a long breath, then said, "Fine. Let's see what the Queen of Performance has to say." The room was colder than I expected, gray walls, a scratch table, and a chair that wobbled with every slight shift of weight. They brought her in wearing county orange, her wrists cuffed, her hair tied back in a tight knot that made her face look even sharper. She sat down across from me and stared, silent, For a full minute. No smile. No apology. Just those pale green eyes that used to watch me sleep now studying me like I was an old, broken thing. "You're really going through with this," she said at last. I didn't answer. I just leaned back in the chair, arms crossed, giving her the silence she once weaponized against me. "I was never going to actually kill you," she muttered, like that somehow made it less grotesque. "It was just supposed to be enough to put you out for a while, make you look unstable, maybe unfit to run the company. I just wanted to take everything," I said quietly. "No," her voice cracked slightly. "I just wanted a fresh start. With Daniel. We were tired of waiting for you to step aside. You never saw how you made people feel. Like they were just gears in your perfect machine." I laughed once, hollow and bitter. "So instead of leaving, you decided to sabotage me? Drug me? Leave our son to think I might die?" Her mouth twitched. "I didn't want Adam involved." "But you involved him the second you tried to erase me from his life," I snapped, leaning forward. "You don't get to rewrite that." She didn't flinch. "You were always so focused on your work. On appearances. On being the perfect husband, father, CEO. I was suffocating, John. I needed something real." "Daniel," I asked, "that's real to you? A man who stole from me, lied to me, used my trust like a currency?" "He listened," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "He made me feel seen." I stared at her for a long time. I wasn't angry in that moment. I wasn't anything. I realized that was the most frightening feeling of all. Not rage. Not heartbreak. Just a vacuum. Like something essential had been scooped out of me and wouldn't come back. Was any of it real? I asked finally. The early years. Our wedding. When Adam was born. Were you really there with me? Or were you already waiting for a better offer? Her eyes shimmered, but she didn't cry. "I loved you," she said. "But I also resented you." That's the part one never said out loud. I stood slowly. "You know what's funny? You almost had me. If Adam hadn't spoken up, if I'd taken one more bite, I might not be standing here. And you'd be out there with my company, my money, and my best friend, telling the world I had a nervous breakdown. You thought you knew me so well." She said nothing, just watched as the guard led her away. I left the jail more tired than I'd felt in years. Not physically, emotionally. I drove past the lake house on the way home and parked just far enough to stare at it from a distance. The house Daniel and I bought when the company hit its first million in revenue. It was supposed to be a retreat, a reward. Instead, it had become the hideout for the people who dismantled my life piece by piece. I imagined them here, laughing over wine, rehearsing their plan, mocking my trust like it was some running joke. That night, I sat Adam down. We talked for hours. I told him everything in pieces, just enough for his age, but not so much that it would poison his hope. He asked hard questions. I answered all of them. "Is Mom going to be in jail forever?" he asked quietly. "No," I said, "but she's going to be gone for a long time." He nodded, then looked out the window. "I don't know if I'll miss her." I felt a deep, impossible ache in my chest. "It's okay if you do. And it's okay if you don't. All I care about is that you feel safe." He looked at me then, really looked. "I feel safer now." And in that moment, for the first time in weeks, I let myself believe we might survive this. I didn't return to the company right away. After the arrests and the boardroom fallout, I took a formal leave of absence. Some people assumed I was ashamed, humiliated by the scandal. Others thought I was just licking my wounds. The truth was simpler and heavier. I needed space to grieve. Not just the betrayal. Not just Cassandra and Daniel. I had to mourn the version of my life I thought was real. That's the part no one talks about. How when someone detonates your trust, the blast doesn't just wound you. It incinerates your sense of reality. I spent mornings with Adam, just the two of us. We started walking to school instead of driving. Some days we didn't talk at all, just kicked rocks along the sidewalk. Other days, he asked things like, "When did you know she didn't love you anymore? Or do you think people can change? Or do they just get better at hiding?" He was 13 going on 40, and I hated that he had to grow up like this. But I also loved him more fiercely than I ever had before. He wasn't just my son now. He was my witness, my partner in survival. Cassandra's trial began 6 weeks after her arrest. It wasn't sensationalized, no cameras, no dramatic testimony. Just quiet facts delivered like punches to the gut. The forensic toxicologist explained how the drug would have knocked me unconscious in under 5 minutes. The detective laid out the timeline of calls, the GPS data, the cash withdrawals. Daniel's attorney tried to separate their involvement, but the call recordings made that impossible. In the end, the jury took only 3 hours. Cassandra was sentenced to 8 years. Daniel got 5. I didn't attend the sentencing. I stayed home, watching Adam practice his jump shot in the driveway. His form was off, too much wrist, not enough arc, but I didn't correct him. Not yet. I just watched, grateful. He was still here. I was still here. Weeks passed. People began to call again. Some apologized for falling silent during the scandal. Others wanted to help me get back on my feet. I kept my circle small. I trusted no one by default now, not out of bitterness, but from sheer necessity. I had to rebuild everything, my career, my identity, even the way I understood love. But I had one thing I hadn't had before, clarity. I visited the lake house once more, alone this time. The front door creaked, untouched since the police search. In the bedroom, a scarf of Cassandra's still hung on the chair, fluttering slightly from the open window. I didn't touch it. I just sat on the edge of the bed and took a long, ragged breath. In the closet, I found a shoebox. Inside were photos of me and Cassandra in college. One of her wedding. A sonogram of Adam. Letters. Not love letters, more like journal entries. One read, "I miss the version of us we used to be. I don't think he sees me anymore." I closed the box and left it behind. Maybe those were her truths, but they didn't excuse the lies. I started seeing a therapist. At first, it was just about processing the trauma, but soon it became about patterns, about why I hadn't noticed the distance, why I had ignored the signs, why I gave so much of myself to people who would use me as a means to an end. It hurt, but it helped. Adam went to therapy too. At first, he hated it. Said it felt like being graded on his feelings. But slowly, he opened up. He talked about the night he heard Cassandra on the phone, about the days he watched me drift away on business trips, about how afraid he was that no one would believe him. "I believe you now," I told him, one night as we folded laundry. "Always." He looked up, holding a pair of his socks. "Promise." "I swear it." That was the day I knew I'd never let him doubt his voice again. 6 months later, the house felt like ours again. Not perfect, not healed in the storybook sense, but honest. The silence no longer hummed with secrets, and the air no longer carried the stale aftertaste of distrust. Adam had started laughing again, really laughing. The kind that came from his gut and made him snort mid-sentence. Sometimes I'd hear it from his room when he was on a video call with friends, and I'd just stand outside the door, breathing it in like medicine. I returned to the company cautiously. The board welcomed me back, but with wary eyes. I didn't blame them. After all, the man I'd trusted to build our empire had almost used it to bury me. I met with every department head individually, not just to reassure them, but to listen. Really listen. For years, I'd been so focused on vision, growth, and control that I missed how isolated I'd become, how unapproachable. Cassandra hadn't been wrong about everything. I had built a fortress. I just never expected betrayal to come from inside the walls. Daniel's shares were dissolved. His office cleaned out. But I didn't gloat. Revenge was too small a reward for the ruin he'd left behind. I wanted something bigger, legacy. I renamed one of our scholarship programs after Adam. A quiet tribute, not for show, but as a reminder of the boy who saved me when I couldn't see the danger myself. Cassandra wrote from prison. The first letter was 3 pages long. Rationalizations, grievances, subtle rewrites of what happened. I didn't respond. The second was shorter. A request to see Adam. That one I tore up. She'd made her choices, and I'd made mine. I wasn't bitter anymore. I was resolved. Some people lose their way. Others dig tunnels behind your back while smiling to your face. Cassandra wasn't a lost soul. She was a strategist with a knife behind her back. Adam asked about her sometimes, but not often. When he did, I answered honestly but carefully. She loved you in her own way, I'd say, but she made some decisions that hurt us both. It's okay to miss her. It's also okay to not want her back. One evening, he came into the kitchen while I was stirring spaghetti sauce, his face thoughtful. "Do you ever think about forgiving her?" I looked at him, really looked. 13, going on wise. "I think about it," I said. "Forgiveness is complicated. Sometimes it's about letting go, but sometimes it's just about surviving." Would you let her come back if she said she was sorry? I set down the spoon. No, I said gently. Some things break so deeply they can't be put back the way they were. And it's not because I hate her. It's because I finally learned how to protect what matters. He nodded slowly. Good. And that was it. We never spoke of it again that week. Spring rolled in with soft rain and longer days. I started gardening again, something I hadn't done since the early years of our marriage. Adam helped, mostly by digging holes too shallow or watering the same spot until it became a swamp. But I didn't care. It wasn't about the plants. It was about planting something that would stay rooted, something that wouldn't turn on me in the dark. We built new routines. Taco Tuesdays, movie Fridays, no phones at dinner, no lies between us. Even if the truth was uncomfortable, we weren't a traditional family anymore. We were something rawer, realer, held together not by expectation, but by choice. And as I sat on the porch one evening, sipping tea while Adam shot hoops in the driveway, I realized something. I wasn't waiting for peace anymore. I was living it, not in some grand, sweeping sense, but in the tiny, hard-won moments, the steady rhythm of ordinary days, the silence I no longer feared, the betrayal no longer defined me. The mask had slipped, and I had survived it. If this story gripped you and left you thinking about the hidden layers in family and trust, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more real-life inspired dramas that explore betrayal, resilience, and the power of setting boundaries. Your support helps bring these powerful narratives to life. See you soon in the next story.